The ticker numbers bled red like open wounds, each digit another slice into Ethan's chest. His voice trembled as he whispered, "It's gone." The office lights felt too bright, too cruel against the sudden darkness in his thoughts. CNBC's anchor spoke with detached urgency, listing company after company folding like paper boats in a storm. Ethan clenched his jaw, pretending the knot in his stomach was anger, not fear. Maya's last article echoed in his head, warning about valuations built on air. Alex sat across the table, eyes wide, muttering, "It'll bounce back." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the sinking graph screamed otherwise. His hands gripped the desk so hard his knuckles blanched, as if he could hold the company in place through sheer force. In that moment, the future he'd fought for didn't just feel uncertain, it felt stolen. The hum of computers was deafening, and yet the silence between the three of them was louder. Maya burst through the glass doors of the newsroom, the air thick with the sound of clattering keyboards and ringing phones. She said, "It's chaos out there." The editor barely looked up, barking for more updates as headlines rolled in faster than they could be printed. She wove between desks piled with coffee cups and financial reports, her eyes scanning for someone who could confirm the rumor that Ethan Cole's company was bleeding out. The glow of monitor screens reflected in her eyes, numbers flashing like warning sirens. Her phone buzzed again, another anonymous tip, another piece of the puzzle. Outside, rain streaked the tall windows, the city's skyline blurred by the downpour. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and urgency. Ethan's office felt like a pressure cooker. Alex sat hunched over his laptop, typing frantically as if speed could reverse the market. "We just need one good announcement," he said, voice wavering. Ethan didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the cascading red numbers. Every breath felt heavier, the hum of the air conditioning now an oppressive drone. Outside the glass walls, employees whispered in clusters, glancing nervously inside. A notification pinged, another major investor pulling out. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to stand straighter, as though posture alone could project confidence. Inside, the panic was clawing its way to the surface. Greg Turner lounged in his leather chair, skyline glittering behind him. He spoke into his headset, voice smooth as silk. "Yes, short everything they touch." His hand swirled the ice in his glass, the clink echoing in the silent office. Multiple screens reflected in his glasses, each showing the same downward spiral. The city lights blinked like a predator's eyes in the distance. "I know." Greg leaned back, confident, as if the chaos outside was a symphony he had orchestrated. Ethan sat alone in his dim apartment, the glow from the single desk lamp pooling around him. The silence was suffocating. His leather-bound notebook lay open, but the pen in his hand hovered uselessly. Outside, the city moved on without him, headlights streaking past in the rain. He whispered to no one, "How did it all vanish so fast?" The words hung in the air, unanswered. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed, fading into the distance. The memory still burned bright in Ethan's mind, the day they rang the NASDAQ opening bell. The air was electric, the future infinite. He'd said to Alex, "We've made history." Alex laughed, young and invincible. Cameras flashed, capturing them in sharp suits that felt like armor. Investors swarmed like bees to honey, their voices a hum of promises. Ethan's parents called to say they'd seen him on TV, pride thick in their voices. In that moment, the idea of failure felt absurd. The numbers on the screen only went up, green arrows marching ever higher. The champagne tasted like victory, but also like something heavier, an unspoken expectation that the climb would never end. Ethan didn't know it then, but the top was closer than he imagined. The office in those early days was nothing but energy and caffeine. Maya had visited once to profile them, and the room buzzed with the kind of optimism you could almost touch. Alex said, "This is going to change the world," and Ethan had believed it completely. Whiteboards overflowed with ideas, each scribble a future billion-dollar feature. Outside, the dot-com gold rush had infected every investor's heart. Inside, every late night felt like an investment in destiny. No one asked about profits, they only asked how fast they could grow. Venture capital flowed like wine at Greg Turner's parties. Ethan remembered the rooftop event where it all began, Greg leaning in with that knowing smile. "You've got vision," Greg said, sliding a check across the table. The city sparkled below, the hum of traffic mixing with the clink of champagne glasses. Around them, founders traded big ideas like playing cards, each one more outrageous than the last. Greg's promise was simple: unlimited fuel, no brakes. And in that moment, Ethan couldn't imagine why he'd ever need to slow down. The first IPO pitch was pure theater. The conference hall lights dimmed, and Ethan took the stage to applause. "We're not just building software," he declared, "we're building the future." The slides glowed behind him, each graph a perfect upward curve. Investors nodded, entranced. Alex sat in the front row, eyes shining. By the end, hands shot up with questions, but none about risk. Only hunger: how soon could they buy in? Ethan walked off stage to handshakes and backslaps, the sound of pen on paper, as deals were signed on the spot. Those early stock days were a drug. Ethan would sit in his office, blinds open to the city, watching the green arrows climb like ivy. Alex would burst in with printouts of the day's numbers, grinning like they'd just won the lottery. Greg would call to talk about expansion, new markets, new hires, new everything. Maya's articles painted them as pioneers, the faces of a new era. Ethan believed it all, every glowing word. And why wouldn't he? Back then the graphs only pointed one way. The boardroom smelled faintly of burnt coffee and tension. Greg leaned across the polished table, his voice like a whip. "We need to announce the next big thing, now." Ethan rubbed his temples. "It's not ready." Greg's eyes narrowed, the smile gone. "Ready doesn't matter, perception does." Alex sat in the corner, fidgeting with his hoodie string, avoiding eye contact. The stock chart on the wall had flattened, the upward climb now a worrying plateau. Outside, rain streaked the windows in long, slow lines, as if time itself had begun to drag. The burn rate numbers glared from Ethan's laptop, every line item screaming urgency. He called the CFO, voice low. "Cut anything we can without making it look like panic." Down the hall, laughter from the engineering team felt like it belonged in another world. Ethan closed the spreadsheet, staring at the reflection of his own face in the black screen. "We just need one more quarter," he muttered. But deep down, he knew that time was a luxury he didn't have. Maya sat in the corner of a crowded cafe, her notebook open, pen tapping against the page. The numbers from Ethan's last earnings call didn't add up, and the gap gnawed at her. She replayed his interview in her mind, watching the subtle hesitation before he'd answered certain questions. "Something's off," she whispered to herself. Outside, the street buzzed with people chasing dreams, but Maya's instincts told her some dreams were already dying. Greg's voice carried across the gala ballroom like a preacher's sermon. "They're the future," he boomed, raising a glass toward Ethan. Applause followed, cameras flashing. Ethan forced a smile, but inside, the praise felt heavy, like a spotlight revealing too much. Greg leaned in, voice low now. "Remember, hype feeds the market. Feed it well." Ethan nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat, knowing the line between momentum and madness was blurring fast. Back at the office, Ethan gathered the leadership team. His voice was steady, but every word was calculated. "We're adjusting projections to reflect strategic realignment." The truth, that revenue was stalling, never left his lips. Alex looked at him, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Ethan avoided his gaze, turning instead to the screen filled with carefully massaged charts. The truth could wait. The market couldn't. The quarterly review was supposed to be routine, but Ethan felt the walls closing in. Numbers were buried in vague categories, projections padded with optimism. "We're still on track," he told the board, his voice steady. Greg nodded with approval, while a few directors exchanged wary glances. Outside the glass, the city skyline glowed in late afternoon haze, indifferent to the tension inside. Ethan clicked to the next slide, pretending the graphs weren't lies dressed in corporate blue. In the engineering wing, Alex scrolled through specs for the new product. Only half the code existed. "We can't ship this," he muttered. Ethan stepped in quietly, laying a hand on his shoulder. "We just need the demo to impress. Real thing comes later." Alex's jaw tightened, but he nodded. The hum of servers filled the silence between them, like a warning no one wanted to hear. Maya stared at her laptop screen, the leaked document open like a smoking gun. Burn rates were far higher than reported, and several partnerships listed were nothing but unsigned letters of intent. She whispered, "They're bluffing the market." The hum of her apartment heater was the only reply. She reached for her phone, fingers hovering over Ethan's number, then stopped. Some truths needed careful timing. The marketing video shoot was a masterpiece of illusion, slick animations, staged user testimonials, and shots of a product that didn't yet exist. Ethan stood in the corner, watching actors read scripts like gospel. Greg leaned in. "This will buy us months." Ethan didn't respond. The words felt like a contract with something darker than the market. That night, Ethan walked the empty office alone. The hum of dormant computers echoed like whispers in a cathedral. He stopped at Alex's desk, eyes lingering on a sticky note with half-written code logic. The city lights shimmered through the windows, each one a reminder of promises yet unpaid. He whispered to the dark, "Just a little longer." But the dark didn't answer. It never does. The newsroom was nearly empty, but the hum of servers and printers filled the silence like background static in a confession booth. Maya sat in a pool of warm lamplight, her laptop open to the leaked emails she had chased for weeks. Greg's words were precise, surgical in cruelty. "Short every position before the press hits. Don't miss a single one." She scrolled, heart thudding, the pieces of every suspicious quote and every half-smile finally clicking together. Her pen rolled to the edge of the desk, tapping softly on the wood. "He's been gutting them from the inside," she whispered, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. Rain pounded the windows, streaking glass with silver veins, as though the city itself wanted to wash the story clean before it could be told. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the smell of stale coffee and printer ink, knowing that what she held was more than a headline. It was a weapon. Ethan sat hunched at his desk, the only light in the apartment coming from his phone screen. The anonymous message had no greeting, no explanation, just Greg's email thread in full. Every line dripped with betrayal. Market moves time to cripple his company, instructions to crush confidence. His hands trembled as he scrolled, the glow casting hard shadows across his face. Greg's signature was there in neat, unshakable type, like a stamp of inevitability. Outside, the rain pressed against the glass in uneven bursts, each drop a small drumbeat of finality. He leaned back slowly, feeling the chair creak beneath him, the air in the room heavy with the scent of wet concrete drifting in from the open window. The city was still moving, horns blaring, lights flickering, but Ethan heard only the roar of his own pulse and the quiet truth settling over him. His closest ally had been digging his grave from the start. The penthouse lounge felt like the eye of a storm, silent, luxurious, untouchable. Greg sat near the window, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass, the muted television beside him looping images of plummeting markets. The red arrows on the ticker slid downward like knives, and a faint smile curled at the edge of his lips. His broker's voice spilled from the headset, "Positions are up triple, exactly as you predicted." Greg spoke without hesitation, his tone a surgeon's precision. "Keep going. Squeeze it dry." Beyond the glass, lightning carved jagged lines through the night sky, bathing the skyline in flashes of cold white. The reflection of those strikes danced across the polished table, fractured and fleeting, much like the fortunes he'd just destroyed. The world outside roared with thunder, but in here, the sound was a quiet, steady confirmation of his power. Maya's fingers hovered over the keypad, as she stood on the rain-slick sidewalk outside her apartment. The storm had soaked through her coat, but she barely noticed. Each ring in her ear was a drumbeat of urgency. When Ethan finally answered, she didn't waste breath. "I have proof," she said. There was a pause, a stretch of silence long enough for her to hear the hiss of passing tires and the distant hum of streetlights. His voice was low, cautious. "Where?" She glanced down the street, neon signs shimmering in the puddles. "Meet me tonight, Dottie." The words felt like a trigger being pulled, the kind that couldn't be undone. A bus rumbled past, sending a spray of water against her legs, but her grip on the phone stayed tight. Somewhere, she could already feel the gravity of the next hour pulling them both in. The diner smelled faintly of coffee and old vinyl, the fluorescent lights above buzzing with a low hum. Ethan slid into the booth opposite Maya, his eyes scanning the sheaf of printed emails she pushed toward him. The pages felt heavy in his hands, each line of Greg's betrayal heavier still. He read in silence, the sound of rain now replaced by the soft hiss of the coffee machine and the occasional clink of cutlery from the only other occupied table. Finally, he set the papers down, his jaw clenched. "He was my partner." Maya's gaze didn't waver. "He was your executioner." Her voice was steady, but there was a trace of something else. Pity maybe, or the understanding of someone who knew how fragile an empire could be. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist, but the booth felt colder than it should have. The ballroom shimmered under 100 chandeliers, each crystal catching the light like frozen sparks, but to Ethan, the air felt thin, stretched tight like glass about to crack. Greg stood near the front, his champagne glass raised high, voice smooth and commanding. "To vision that never blinks," he declared, and the crowd erupted in applause, a sound too loud to be honest. Ethan climbed the shallow steps to the stage, his pulse thudding in his ears, mouth dry as ash. He took the mic, scanning the sea of glittering gowns and tailored suits. "Before we toast," he said, forcing his voice to steady, "I need to say something real." The ripple of curiosity through the room felt like a shift in wind before a storm. Maya, at the edge of the press row, lifted her phone to record, her expression locked and unreadable. Alex hovered by the stage steps, clutching his tablet like a talisman. Ethan's gaze locked with Greg's. The man's smile didn't falter, but the air between them burned. "We built a promise," Ethan said, "but we are not there yet." Murmurs rose, brittle, like ice underfoot. Greg chuckled lightly into the mic. "Save the humility for the shareholders' letter." Ethan's reply came like a flint strike. "They deserve truth tonight." The applause faltered and died, the silence between them louder than the music had been. Phones lit up across the room like fireflies in the dark, their cold glow breaking the warm haze of the gala. A trader in the back whispered sharply, "Circuit breaker hit again." But the words carried a thread of panic woven through the room. Over at the bar, screens flickered to red, graphs diving in sharp, merciless arcs. Ethan glanced at them and felt as though the carpet had tilted under his feet. Greg's smile thinned just enough to notice, the edges tightening like a seam under strain. He clinked his glass softly and said, "Volatility is oxygen, ladies and gentlemen." A forced laugh bubbled and died almost instantly. Alex stepped closer, voice low and urgent. "Orders are canceling in microseconds." Maya's phone buzzed. She scanned the message and murmured, "Major Fund just dumped their stake." The jazz band on stage faltered mid-song, the final chord hanging in the air like an unanswered question. Ethan's voice cut through the shifting air. "This is not a show, it is a reckoning." The mood split down the middle, half the crowd moving toward screens and exits, half frozen in place. Greg's eyes tracked the plunging numbers like a predator following prey, even as he said, "Hold the line." The backstage smelled of velvet curtains, dust and nerves. Ethan caught Greg just as he was stepping into the shadows. "You shorted us from the start," he said, voice low but laced with heat. Greg tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at one corner. "I hedged reality," he replied, each word precise. Ethan closed the gap, shoulders squared, eyes locked. You bled my people dry to feed your myth. Greg's gaze glittered like polished stone. Markets reward courage, not confession. Behind them, Maya slipped into position, half hidden, phone raised, her breathing measured. Alex lingered near the door, caught between admiration and horror, his loyalty bending under the weight of what he was hearing. Ethan's words came steady as a blade. Own it tonight, or I will. Greg's smile didn't touch his eyes. You won't survive the hour. The curtains swayed with a whisper as the restless murmur of the crowd filtered in. The heat of the stage lights bled into the shadows, and Ethan realized the point of no return was already behind him. Across the city, the office felt like a war room without a general. The air buzzed with the static hum of servers, and every screen bled red. Engineers hunched over keyboards, their faces pale in the cold lead light. Alex's laptop pinged relentlessly. Alert after alert, each one marking another failure point. He muttered under his breath, "This code is a costume, not a body." Ethan's voice crackled through the speakerphone, urgent and sharp. Pull the demo before it collapses on live feeds. A junior developer spun in her chair, saying, "It's already buffering on the investor wall." Alex's throat tightened. "I'm killing it now," he said, fingers flying over keys. The screen went black, then bloomed into a gray error card, the false stream evaporating in a single breath. Sirens wailed somewhere outside, their echo bouncing off the glass walls. Alex leaned back, the chair creaking, and whispered to no one, "We should have shipped truth, not theater." The only reply was the low, constant hiss of server fans. Back in the ballroom, Maya walked toward the podium, the weight of every step anchored in the documents she carried. The crowd murmured, sensing something unscripted. She took the mic, voice calm and cutting through the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have documentation you need to see." The room stilled. She mirrored her phone to the giant screens, and Greg's emails lit up like forensic slides, dates, trades, and cold commands. Greg's voice shot back, low but edged. "This is defamatory." Maya didn't flinch. "This is sourced and verified." Ethan stood at the stage's edge, watching the ripple of shock cross the audience as they read. Alex appeared beside him, eyes heavy. "It's over, isn't it?" Ethan's voice was steady now. "No, it's true at last." Security shifted near the curtains, uncertain of their role. Greg stepped forward, his eyes twin shards of flint, but the room had already turned. Maya's last line rang like a gavel, "Markets forgive failure, not fraud." The collective breath released, and somewhere on the silent screens, the last candle chart collapsed into nothing. Dawn crept over the city like an exhausted truth-teller, its pale light spilling over glass and steel. The streets below still glistened from the night's rain, each puddle catching a soft gray shimmer. Maya stood by the window, scrolling through headlines on her phone, the words heavy and sharp. "Greg Turner exposed in short sell scandal." She said quietly, "It's everywhere." Ethan didn't turn from the glass. He watched traffic lights change, the rhythm steady, unbothered by broken empires. "Truth lands heavy," he murmured, each word feeling like a stone in his chest. Behind them, Alex paced with restless steps, rubbing his eyes until they burned. "People will say we fooled them," he said, voice half accusation, half confession. Ethan's eyes closed for a moment before he answered, "I fooled myself first." The phones on the desk buzzed again and again, their vibrations overlapping like a tremor. Maya looked up from a new message. "Regulators want statements by noon." The word regulators shifted the air in the room, making it heavier. Outside, delivery trucks rumbled past, and a cyclist's bell cut briefly through the glass. Ethan turned, walking toward his desk, already knowing the first line of the letter they would write. "We'll say what we should have said a year ago," he said, and Maya's slow nod felt like the settling of gravity. The office felt like a stage after the final curtain, props abandoned, the air still holding the echo of performance. Desks sat in neat rows, each one a little island of unfinished plans. Monitors were dark, reflecting the ceiling lights like closed eyes. Alex stood near the whiteboard, its faded marker lines still hinting at graphs that once soared. "Do we tell the team everything?" he asked, not looking back. Ethan ran his thumb along the edge of a coffee ring on the table, a faint smile at the imperfection. "All of it," he said, the words steady, no room for varnish. The echo carried faintly, bouncing off glass partitions. Maya was already at her laptop, fingers poised over the keys. "Plain language. No alibis," she said. Ethan felt the muscle memory to polish, to frame, to angle, but let it die before it formed. "We named the shortcuts, the pressure, the fear, the lies," he said, each item like a stone laid down. The HVAC sighed, as if agreeing. Alex's voice was softer when he said, "I wanted to believe more than I wanted to check." Ethan stepped to him, a steady hand to the shoulder. "Belief without proof is theater." The board behind them, once the map of their climb, stood still as an epitaph. The regulator's conference room was all clean lines, pale walls, and the faint antiseptic smell of policy. A large clock ticked with unnerving regularity, its hands moving with the patience of stone. Maya sat beside Ethan, a thick binder in front of her, tabs like flags in a long battle. "We will submit the documents as recorded," she said, her voice flat but strong. Ethan faced the panel, their expressions unreadable, and let the words fall without defense. "I inflated signals and hid risk under narrative," he said. Pen scratched, ink binding his confession to paper. He didn't mention the demo that never worked, only the reality they perform. "We called momentum progress," he added, his voice steady despite the weight. Alex cleared his throat before speaking. "I shipped what I knew was not ready," he said, the truth stiff but freeing. The lead investigator looked up from her notes. "Your cooperation is noted." The silence that followed felt like a room taking a long breath. Ethan glanced at Maya. She tapped the stack of papers once, squaring the edges. "We'll deliver the rest by end of day," she said. The clock ticked on, neither condemning nor forgiving, only marking the next second. Greg's fall was not dramatic. No sirens, no shouting. Just the sound of elevator doors parting and the sharp hum of camera shutters. He stepped into the lobby flanked by his lawyer, his navy suit perfect, his face unreadable except for the tight set of his jaw. A reporter's voice cut through the chaos. "Did you manipulate the market?" Greg kept walking, the pause deliberate, the answer clipped. "No comment." Flashbulbs ignited, white spots bursting across the marble like sudden storms. Maya stood across the street, her notebook closed, recorder off. "A headline is a map, not the terrain," she said softly, more to herself than to Ethan, who stood beside her with his hands in his coat pockets. Through the glass doors, Greg stopped at the reception desk, signing a single-page document that looked more like surrender than routine. He never looked toward the crowd. Alex, just behind Ethan, whispered, "I thought he couldn't lose." Ethan exhaled, his breath fogging slightly in the cool air. "Gravity always wins," he said. "It just takes its time." The elevator doors closed again behind Greg, swallowing him into the building's throat. Night returned with a slow, almost reluctant rain. The office, once electric, now stood quiet except for the faint patter on the windows. Ethan moved through the dim space, boxing the last fragments of the company. Launch badges, branded mugs, a stack of unused business cards. His leather notebook sat on the desk, its pages worn and creased. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. Maya stood near the doorway, her coat folded over one arm. "The story runs at dawn," she said, her voice carrying both finality and release. Ethan nodded, the sound of her words settling deep. "Make the ending useful," he said. Alex was coiling the last cable from a workstation, looping it carefully as if respect could be paid to the tools themselves. "What do we build now?" he asked. Ethan looked at the notebook and felt its weight, more honest now than ever before. "Something that survives questions," he said. The overhead lights clicked off in sequence, casting them into shadow. The windows turned into mirrors, reflecting three silhouettes, each shaped by the night behind them. We start small, Ethan added, and we say no when we should. Outside, a siren's wail faded into the rain, and the final door closed with a seal soft as it kept promise.